Baltimore City Council, Ways and Means Committee, we're back in session. Council Bill 23-0381, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. Eric Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, joined by Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee, Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District, Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District, member of the committee, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, member of the committee. To my immediate right, Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. We have representatives from Council President Nick Mosby's office and Mayor Brandon Scott's office. We are here for a twofer. We're doing BBMR, and Department of Finance. What we're going to do is focus the first portion of the hearing on BBMR. So we're really going to be talking about budgeting. I'm going to ask our colleagues to refrain from questions related to the Department of Finance operations, whether we're talking about property taxes or any other function within the Department of Finance. What we're going to focus this first half hour on is really just about budgeting and what it is that BBMR does. So if there's something that comes up before we finish the BBMR thing, I'm going to push that until after. So with that, Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Good morning, Chairman Costello and members of the committee. I'm very happy to be here today to present the fiscal 24 recommended budget for BBMR, that's Service 708 within the Finance Department budget. BBMR's recommended budget for fiscal 24 is $2.37 million, approximately $27,000 higher than the fiscal 23 adopted budget. The recommended budget includes funding for 19 positions, consistent with the fiscal 23 position count. The recommended budget includes $100,000 in assumed savings that will be realized through turnover and vacancies based off of prior year trends. The budget also includes $30,000 to create an internship program geared towards creating pathways for local students.
Laura, hang on one second. Nate, can you close those doors, please? Thank you. Please continue.
The budget also includes $30,000 to create an internship program geared towards creating pathways for local students to learn about job opportunities doing budget work for the city. In fiscal 24, our service's key goals include enhancing community outreach efforts around the city's budget. These efforts will be focused on establishing an ongoing conversation with our residents about the city's budget to ensure resident voice and priorities are reflected in the city's budget. Successfully implementing a new system to build the city's budget. This is part of phase 3 of the Workday project. Our new system will migrate this service from our existing legacy budget system and will be fully integrated with Workday. Supporting the administration and the city's 10-year financial plan update to identify ways to bring the city's budget into structural balance while identifying funding opportunities to make key investments. And finally, partnering with the City Administrator and Office of Performance and Innovation around the work of the agency performance plans to incorporate these plans into how performance measures are used and reported through the city's budget. Our service continues to be focused on meeting our performance targets. In fiscal 24, we engaged approximately 4,100 residents around the city's budget, exceeding our target. In fiscal 24, we are aiming to reach 4,300 residents through these outreach efforts. In fiscal 22, the accuracy of our revenue forecast was 9.8%. Now, this is measured in terms of the variance between actual revenue and budget assumptions. Historically, BBMR has averaged a 2% variance for this metric. The higher variation in fiscal 22 was driven by record high revenue from the transfer and recordation tax that was driven by the real estate activity in 2021 and 2022. I'll be happy to answer any questions from the committee regarding our budget.
Thank you. I want to start off, can we talk about, Laura, we've talked about this a little bit, and Bob, we've been talking about it over the years. Can we talk about BBMR's efforts to refine performance measures in other areas in the budget book, obviously outside of BBMR?
For sure.
And one last thing, to make them more both really qualitative.
For sure. We understand that, there's, across the performance metrics that get reported for our services, there's really sort of a spectrum in terms of the quality of those metrics in terms of how they help us understand how the service is doing and make, in order to assess performance. One of the things that we are very excited about as part of the administration's annual performance plan process is that we are working with, under the direction of the city administrator's office to really streamline the way that city services are identifying and reporting out on metrics. And what that means is that, as you heard from City Administrator Leach yesterday, agencies will be submitting and updating those plans throughout the fiscal year. And there'll be more time to actually look at the metrics and sort of understand what it is that the metrics are telling us in terms of trying to assess, how does that play into the budget and discussions around resources. With how the metrics are functioning today, agencies report on them in the budget process. They're coming in at a time where we're getting lots of information, both financial information as well as the performance information, and all of that. We're trying to analyze all that information in a really compressed timeline. And so by utilizing the performance plan process, we're going to be able to stretch that out and have sort of ongoing conversations about where we are with performance to make more strategic and targeted decisions about what those metrics are telling us. What I can say is that through the leadership of OPI and the city administrator's office, we really are focused on sort of refining the categories and really trying to identify metrics that really do tell the story about that service. So removing metrics that are measuring things that are outside of the service's control, or sort of pushing agencies to measure things that maybe they would have shied away from in the past because they didn't necessarily like the story that the metric was telling. So again, I do think that you will see improved refinement as we go into the fiscal 25 budget process. And certainly, we know that this body spends a lot of time and attention looking at those metrics. And so I would definitely be happy to meet with any members of the council to hear specific feedback about agencies or services where you've really, over the years, identified areas of weakness where we need to improve.
Got it. Thank you. One other comment. You've done a fantastic job in the year you've been here. I may not agree with where you've placed certain things in certain places in the budget book, but you have done a phenomenal job with the budget book. Your team has been great to work with. Really appreciate all the hard work, the collaboration. We've had dozens and dozens of meetings. I find you to be more friendly and optimistic than your predecessor, who I also think is amazing. But you have... And it's great to still have Bob with us with the wealth of knowledge and experience he has, but it really has been a pleasure working with you this last year, and I know we've got many more years of work to do, so I appreciate it very much. I'm going to turn it over to committee colleagues first. Council Vice President, do you have anything? And just as a reminder for our colleagues, this first portion of the hearing, we're just focusing on BBMR and the actual budgeting process, not necessarily functions of finance or where spending is specifically going.
Thank you. No questions, but just a statement that I concur with what you just said. I'm muted. Okay. I just want to concur with what you just said. You came to this office and just really kick-started everything, and thank you for that. And today is National Smile Day, so it was good to see some laughs over there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sometimes it's tough to get a smile out of Bob Seneme. Councilwoman McCray. Oh, we'll just go down the line. Councilwoman Porter.
I did have one quick question about, and I know, Director, I had brought this up very early when you first started about having a budget 101 for council members. And I believe you all did that very well, kind of documenting where things are within agencies. But I wanted to know if we can kind of take it a step further next budget cycle to really understand like budget mechanics. I think it's really important to educate us as council members how to review the budget. Most people think that you can just move money and, that's not the case. So, whenever I manage a budget, it's you move something, something else has to shift. And I think that needs to be a clear understanding within this body, but also with the general public as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's great feedback, and an area where I would really like to spend some time as we go into fiscal 25. And I think that is a great area where we can partner with the budget and fiscal staff in the council president's office to provide really robust resources for the council members sort of year-round around the budget process.
And I definitely thank you for your work this year. Bob, you're great, but she was great this year. And also, if we can have some sort, I know this is a long shot, but at a previous hearing, I asked about economic modeling. If there is some sort of kind of tool that the council members can use of, if we take money from this way, how can it shift the budget? And so I think, just having more interactive tools that this body and the public can use, I think would be very beneficial as well. Sometimes we receive requests from community members, and they're not necessarily as feasible as people think they are because of the fixed costs that we have within our budget. And so I think we kind of have to be more transparent in that way to provide those interactive tools to our body and the public.
Yeah, I think that's a great area of opportunity for us. Again, as you mentioned, there are tools that we could develop for you all as council members that I think could really demonstrate a lot of the analysis that we have in-house regarding sort of what our 10-year plan projections look like, so you can sort of maybe understand how different ideas or policy proposals might have a long-term impact on the city's budget. We also really, as I mentioned, one of our big goals for going into fiscal 24 and around planning for the 25 budget is to really step up our efforts around how we engage with residents. This year we had our Balancing Act budget simulation. We got a lot of really good feedback from residents about where that was helpful and where it was lacking, so we look forward to improving that. We can also take that tool a step further after the budget gets adopted and create a tool for residents where they can see sort of how their tax bill gets allocated across different city services. So again, that's really part of sort of creating this ongoing conversation instead of just dropping in on our communities at budget time and saying what's important and then disappearing for a year. I think sort of establishing that sort of robust sort of back and forth hopefully really creates a place where residents want to engage and learn about the city's budget.
Thank you, and just want to stress coordinating with Nate and Dexter on that. Just I know these guys also help put together a really helpful 101 presentation for us. Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to know, you answered one of my questions just now, but I wanted to know what improvements would you guys have around engagement, specifically with communities. I love that you guys offer the sessions. Thanks, Mara, James. Offer these sessions with council members, and we've had a few within my district, and they are very helpful for my communities. But how would we engage, say, like the community organizations to let them know that these are available as well? Are we utilizing the new planning directory to proactively reach out earlier? Yeah. Or what improvements do you just have that you're going to make in this coming fiscal year?
For sure. I think that it's really about a spectrum of strategies. So I think virtual meetings have been a really great resource to allow residents to pop in and to participate around conversations around the budget. I think it makes it a lot easier than just doing everything in person and sort of being able to provide a mix of opportunities. One of the things that we'll be doing is, in addition to sort of our events that get sponsored with council members or with the mayor, also looking for community groups that we can partner with people. So we're not necessarily asking people to come to something special, but we're going and meeting the community where they are. And so really looking at ways that we can sort of lean into those efforts to expand our reach. One of the other things we're doing is we're partnering with Baltimore Core to bring someone where we're borrowing a model from other cities that's worked, where we're bringing on an analyst in our shop where their entire portfolio will be around community engagement. I believe really strongly that this needs to be a central core function of the budget team, and that's hard to do when it's a bolt-on to other people's roles. And so I'm really optimistic about our partnership with Baltimore Core, that if we have someone who's really thinking strategically about those partnerships that we need to build and sort of what a comprehensive strategy will look like, that we'll really be able to expand our reach and footprint with the community in terms of establishing this conversation. And of course, as those plans kind of come into fruition, we'll definitely keep members of the council in the loop so that we can make sure to continue to partner with you all in terms of engaging with your constituents. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councilman Conway.
Laura, I'm going to sing your praises too. Known you for a while, and I knew you would absolutely do well and absolutely excel in this job, and you're doing that to date. So I appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with you, and look forward to continuing to improve this process as we go forward. I'm going to ask a question about the elephant in the room, the elephant being the council and its new ability. I think one of the things we're still trying to sort out is some of the changes in this process and how this new ability of the council to move money around within the budget is considered in the realities of the tightness of that budget. Yeah. I'm curious how you're thinking about changes to that process over time. We are in the process today, but in the future, other considerations that we're thinking about to better inform the council and to provide more opportunity for public feedback in time to have real considerations for changes for the budget.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, I think is a central component to the budget team's role is presenting information about the city's budget in a clear and concise way for policymakers so that it's really understandable sort of, what's in the budget and kind of what's on the table. As we see the council's role in the budget process change, I definitely see our role as being a partner and a collaborator. So I think this year we've really seen through the leadership of Chairman Costello, Council President Mosby, and City Administrator Leach, sort of what that partnership can look like with those sort of ongoing conversations going into budget time. And I, definitely look forward to continuing those conversations to understand, how can our documents be presented in a way that help the council consume and digest what's in the budget. What type of information are we sharing with throughout the fiscal year to help you all sort of go into this time of the year as prepared as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that transparency is going to be important to make sure that any decisions that we make are sound decisions and sensible decisions and well-informed decisions. And so, of course, I'll be in your inbox or text or whatever it takes to make sure that we make sound decisions as a council.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say I loved pages, I think I wrote you about this too. In the executive summary, there is a very detailed outline of all of the ways that we make money and how much we've made in the last few years. And this has been very helpful to me in terms of looking at, where, particularly like, rental licensing and, some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of the fact that we're not making as much as I think we should in rental licensing, and there's a reason for that, right? So there's, so this is very helpful, and it leads me to sort of the detail that I think we'd like to see. I know we already have like 4 books that we look at, and it's a lot of information. But one thing I didn't see this year was the detail page on the HUR. Last year we had a page of HUR that had, and let me just say, HUR means a lot to us, as you know. Many of us fought pretty hard to get more HUR. So we were hoping, or I was hoping to see the same breakdown where you've got a page about HUR, but there was a page last year where it actually had like detailed breakdown about what exactly it paid for.
Okay.
So, and I know that kind of changed a little bit because we, thanks to the city administrator and the ARPA funds and all of that, we were able to, we had decided to utilize HUR not as a, moving away from the bonds, but that the bonds would be gone, but we had some ARPA fill, and then we had the HUR, which I appreciate that as well. So anyway, I just thought that would be something good to see, just because that particular funding source is definitely near and dear to all of our hearts in terms of what it's going to fund. And we see it throughout the budget because you can tell what is but having it in one page would be super helpful as well.
For sure. And I'll study the display of the HUR revenue where we have it broken out by service in the executive summary. I'll study that against our prior year documents, and if there is sort of any missing pieces in comparison to what we previously shared, we can provide that to council so that you have that information.
And then, thank you very much. And also, in line with some of the questioning of my previous colleagues in terms of the, the engagement, it sounds like we're going to, get the budget done, and then we're starting again. And I think that'll be helpful for residents. Sometimes people don't think about the budget until as we get closer, but for you to engage with us in terms of what folks' priorities are, I think is super important. And we can do those, budget one-on-ones when it's not the crunch time. That way we just have like a little bit more time. So I appreciate that you're moving in that direction.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would second most of what everyone else has said. I think you've hit the ground running pretty strongly and been a good partner to our office and helping us understand the budget process. The only thing, and this is just more of a statement, year to year, I typically have a hard time following along with the agency metrics, and I know that they provide them to you. But whatever can be done to better advocate for less sort of widget counting and more like actual impact outcomes would be helpful for us to better understand programs and the intent of these programs and how effective they are. And then also just consistency year to year so that I can easily follow from year to year where progress is. We had a hearing last night where there were no metrics for like 3 years, and then suddenly there's like actuals and goals being set by the agency for a program that wasn't new. And so it was hard for me to understand and my staff to understand like, what do these numbers really mean if there was no goals before, or maybe the goals have changed, and a little bit more context as to like how those metrics were chosen or why they're not, or why we made changes, are all just useful for us. And so I know that's not all in your shop, but I'm just saying it because you're sort of leading the train, but obviously providing the information that's provided to you. So I get the full picture, been around long enough for that, but just wanted to put that on record.
Yeah, and I think sort of what you've framed there is the exact reason why the partnership in terms of how we talk about performance in the budget with the performance plan work is really going to be to really help us take this work to the next level, because council members will be able to call back on any time that you have questions about a metric or sort of trying to understand more of the agency's thinking. You'll be able to go to the performance plan and see sort of, okay, like here are the services' key goals, here's why they've picked these metrics in terms of what is getting presented here. And I do hear your point on consistency, and that's one of the things we really try to strive home with our agency partners too, is that, looking at, we can't change the metrics every year, and when you look at them over a period of time, it is really part of the ongoing story of a service. And so we do need to take the time and attention to pick a good metric that we know we can stick with over a period of time.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We've been joined by Councilman Stokes, 12th District member of the committee. Councilman, you're the last one up. We're focusing just on BBMR, so any questions related to how, okay. Director, now we'll jump into Laura, thank you very much. BBMR team, thank you. Director, if you want to jump into your slide deck.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Moiseyev. I'm the director for the Department of Finance. Chairman Costello, it's a pleasure to be here. Council members.
Director, can you make sure you introduce all the members of your senior team that are here with you, name and position title, please?
Absolutely. They're just going to take a second to come up.
It's just at the left, yeah.
I see.
Just that goal slide was the one, yeah,
That's good. That's good.
and then you can jump into the service.
Sure.
It's fine. Yeah, move them around.
He can tell them he can go up to the mic if he wants them to introduce themselves.
Oh, yeah.
If that's what he's worried about.
All right. Good morning again, and thank you again for having me.
You can go ahead.
All right, I'll go ahead and start. My name is Michael Moiseyev. I am the director for the Baltimore City Department of Finance, and I have a number of members of my senior team here with me. To my right is Julie Floyd, acting chief for the Bureau of Accounting and Payroll Services. To her right is Keisha Brown, acting chief for the Bureau of Procurement. To my left is Bill Harris, head of our grants team. To his left is Johanna Collado. She is head of our I'm trying to remember the full name. Sorry, thanks everyone. It's fiscal integrity team. Thank you so much. And to her left is Sean K. Jackson. She is head of our risk management bureau. And then in the back, we've got Janelle Rogers, who is head of our Bureau of Treasury. Next to her is Carla Neely, who is head of our Bureau of Revenue Collections. Next to her is Bill Clinton, who is head of our systems management team. And then behind me, We've got, of course, Budget Director Laura Larson, who you all just heard from, head of the Bureau of Budget Management Research, Deputy Finance Director Bob Senemy, who oversees the budget and strategic portions of the finance portfolio, and Deputy Director Ioana Moisides, who oversees the operational parts of the Department of Finance portfolio. All right. So I'm going to flip to the slide. Great, thank you. The mission of the Department of Finance is to provide a full range of services to city agencies, collect and invest all monies due the city, manage city debt, develop and implement the annual operating budget, which you all just heard about, manage the city's self-insurance programs, maintain the city's financial records, and execute fiscal policy as established by the Board of Estimates. Our top goals for fiscal '24 come down to systems and people, and they go hand in hand. So to enhance the level of service and transparency citywide, Department of Finance will continue its modernization projects with work on implementing the budget module of Workday, the real property modernization project, and the procurement transformation. Simultaneously, the department will continue to work to align our recruitment goals and increase hiring to ensure the department attracts and retains a qualified, diverse workforce with skill sets and experience that match the changing needs of an enterprise system. This morning, I will briefly go through each service comprising the Department of Finance. We'll spend a bit more time on services that are seeing major changes. And after that, my team and I will be very happy to take your questions. We just heard Director Larson go over BBMR's budget in depth, so we will go ahead to the next slide from there.
Director, can you speak up a little bit, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
There we go. Great. All right, the Bureau of Revenue Collection. Now, this is the single biggest part of finance in terms of both staffing and budget. Though, of course, it brings in several hundredfold of what it costs to operate. This service collects all money that is due to the city through various taxes, fines, and fees. Customers can pay most bills in person, online, through a computer or a smartphone, over the telephone, or by mail. The service operates a call center to address payment and billing questions during normal business hours. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is about balance. That's the main theme of finance. And of course, in budget, we've got money in and money out. In revenue collection, we have to balance the well-being of people who owe the city money, many of whom are vulnerable, with the city's need to collect the funding that supports our critical services and operations. In the last few weeks, we were proud to execute the mayor's order on removing owner-occupied properties assessed at under $250,000 from the 2023 tax sale process, which we believe strikes the right balance right now. In the coming year, we look forward to working with all of you to continue to refine that balance and looking for ways to improve the process. We're also making internal investments that will allow us to be more responsive and easier to work with by improving our staffing model and modernizing our legacy mainframe systems. The next service is Treasury. And the balance here is between risk and investment return. I'm happy to say that the city's finances are sound and our debt load is sustainable. Our operating cash reserves are generating a good return in the current market. We're very closely monitoring the debt ceiling debate that's going on just 40 miles south of us and the effect that it's going to have on bond and equity markets. But we are well positioned to ride out any turbulence and respond as necessary. The next part is administration, the support for the support. That includes technical systems and internal functions like HR, as well as strategic functions within my office that help us coordinate across the city as well as look for efficiencies. We'll be adding to that efficiency function next year with an additional analyst to expand our corporate compliance work. We're also building back our internal HR capacity to help us tackle the staffing challenges we've all been experiencing. These adjustments are funded through savings we've identified in the department, as is the case with all other investments that I'll be talking about later today. Next up is procurement. Procurement is responsible for the purchasing of goods and services used in every city agency. We've added transparency in recent years with the implementation of the Workday system. but the implementation was tumultuous at times, and the work is still not done. Implementation of any new system is only as good as training, which is only as good as our ability to retain the people we just trained. But we are finally starting to see major improvements, even just over the last few months. For example, we've gone from a high of over $50 million in outstanding late invoices last fall to a current level of well under $20 million and continuing to drop every week. That's not only the lowest level since the Workday implementation, that's lower than before the pandemic started. And prompt payment is extremely important to us. We're going to keep getting better, not just in procurement, which only holds one piece of the process, but across city agencies with support from the city administrator, the mayor's office, and in partnership with the comptroller. We're also undertaking a full assessment of our practices through the Procurement Transformation Project, which I look forward to talking to you about later this summer. This is another place where balance is important, as we need to balance between expedient good and service delivery and rules and regulations that ensure legality, quality, and a fair marketplace. We'll be calibrating that balance to align with best national practices. We had also engaged in a national search for a permanent chief of procurement to help us lead the transformation in the Bureau. And I am very pleased to report that Adam Manny, formerly the procurement chief for Prince William County, Virginia, with over 30 years of extensive procurement experience, will be starting in Baltimore on June 12th. And I just want to give a huge thank you to Deputy Chief Keisha Brown for manning the helm for these 2.5 years. And I'm really looking forward to what all of us can do together here as a team. Next up is surplus property. Surplus property disposal offers city agencies professional property disposition for city properties. There are no changes here from last year, so I will move on. Next up is printing services, which offers city agencies as well as Baltimore City Schools a range of professional services such as graphic design, printing, copying, document scanning, data center printing, and forms of distribution. There are no changes here either. Next is payroll. And payroll is an area where we saw significant challenges over the past year, followed by a profound turnaround. Staffing simply cannot be understated here. This was a team that was intended to be 10 people that got down to an effective strength of 1 last summer. We have since implemented a number of changes. We've supplemented the team with temp workers as well as consultants trained in Workday for the short term. We've borrowed payroll experts on loan from other city agencies to build the team back out, and we've aggressively recruited permanent staff for the long term. Calculation errors that were made in retroactive pay adjustments last fall are being cleaned up, and we're offering a much higher level of service today and going forward. Let's see, I want to make sure I'm on the right slide. One moment. There we go. Accounting. Accounting has faced similar staffing challenges, which have been exacerbated by an influx of grant-funded transactions that require complex tracking. And here as well, we've been able to successfully recruit and staff up, as well as work closely with BSIT to address data migration issues during Workday implementation. And despite the challenges, the city's books today are in good shape. The transparency offered by Workday, as well as the efforts of the Bureau of Accounting and Payroll Services and our partners, puts us in a better place to respond to audits than ever before. Moving on to risk management. This is an area that administers the city's insurance program, as well as sets policy to prevent employee injuries by promoting accident prevention, providing safety training, and ensuring regulatory compliance. This service will see a slight reconfiguration of staffing lines in fiscal year 24, but no major changes. Next up is fiscal integrity. Fiscal integrity aims to eliminate inefficiencies and to implement processes to prevent fraud in property tax collections. The recommended budget includes funding for 2 new positions to support tax appeals, pilot reviews, tax credit analysis, and other revenue-generating activity. And Finance Project Management is responsible for system design and support within the Department of Finance, including the Tyler Technologies Munis tax and license system, as well as Workday coordination. There are no changes to this service. And finally, I'd just like to acknowledge the Department of Finance staff for a moment. And, we often say in support organizations like finance that if everything is running well, we shouldn't need miracles. But when you find yourself in need of some magic, it's nice to have some magicians around. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to the analysts, the specialists, the operators, the accountants, the supervisors, and everyone in between for stepping up and stretching yourself to fill the gaps, keep the money flowing, which ultimately kept and is keeping critical services flowing. So I will now be very happy to take your questions.
Thank you. We've been joined by Council President Nick Mosby. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Mr. CFO. Quick question. I know this is more for, I guess, BBMR. It's just a quick request. But for all the new jobs that we're adding throughout the city, obviously, one main point coming into this budget process is the fact that we have so many vacancies, yet in certain instances we're creating new positions, some through ARPA, others just through agency needs. But is there a way that you guys can just itemize all of the new jobs being created under this budget, like by agency, title, and denote if it's like, if there's like inter-office savings that have been identified to create that position, or if that position is expected to be like revenue generating. Again, the idea is that we have so many vacancies, why not just reclass or freeze or do other opportunities? I guess overall view of when agencies have come through the process and we've allowed them to create new positions, I guess what is kind of like the methodology that we use to come up with a budget to identify the creation of new positions?
So, Council President, on that one, what I would suggest that we can do with the positions, I kind of think of them in 3 different categories. I think of new positions that are showing up because they were created mid-year in fiscal 23. A lot of those items were positions where there was funding included in the fiscal 23 budget, but the position creation wasn't reflected in the adopted 23 budget. That came up last night with fire, with some of the new positions that were funded through the ESPP revenue.
Could you explain that process again?
Yeah, so sometimes in the budget process, if the agency knows that they have some staffing plans, but they don't necessarily know exactly what it's going to look like in terms of the types of positions that they're looking for, or sort of what the breakdown is going to be in terms of position spending versus non-personnel spending, they might just budget what we call pending personnel funding. And so what that means is they budget the funding, and then when we move into the fiscal year, as they finalize their plans, they'll go through the necessary approvals to create the positions.
Understood.
And so what you're seeing in the fiscal 24 budget is anything that was created in fiscal 23 and approved by the Expenditure Control Committee and BOE. So we can give you a breakdown of those positions that were created, sort of between budget years. Again, fire is a great example. Fire is where you're going to see a lot of them. We've also had a lot of grant-funded positions that have gotten created post-adoption of the 23 budget. The other 2 categories that we can share with you, the first would be where agencies identified savings in their budget in order to create new positions. The positions that you're seeing in the finance department budget were funded by reductions elsewhere in the department's budget. So we can identify those. And then the third category would be just new spending, where the budget increases funding for the agency to create additional staffing. So we can give a reconciliation of the position count and put each of the positions into one of those 3 categories.
Great. So, and then the only other thing that you didn't mention that I asked was if it's revenue generating. Totally okay if we, from an entrepreneurial or some innovative way, expect that by creating this position, we're going to drive additional revenues to this. I mean, that's really exciting stuff.
Yes.
So if you could kind of denote that in it as well.
For sure.
And then following up on, I guess, the point, the pending personnel funding for fiscal year 2024, would we be able to itemize that as well, like the look ahead of the jobs that aren't necessarily reflected in this particular budget, but we expect to occur between now and the next budget?
Yes, what I can say is that before going to print with the BOE recommended budget, we did really scrub through agency budgets and tried to create the positions where we could. When we can create positions in the budget, we really streamline the hiring process for agencies because they're able to, if the position exists in the budget, they're able to skip those steps where they have to get the position classified, go to ECC and to BOE. They can just start recruitment. So we really did try to streamline. There are a couple of places where agencies didn't necessarily have their full plan, and we can certainly itemize that out for you.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And then back to you, Mr. CFO. I know that we're bringing the procurement specialist on board. Really excited about that. You know, obviously that's been a point of a lot of discussion and concern, not just on the council, but also on the Board of Estimates. And I appreciate your constant participation and responsiveness on the BOE. I guess some of the things I want to talk about, and I'm not going to ask the questions, I'd rather the new person get in place, but really interested in working through the backlog associated with procurement. You know, obviously our small minority women-owned businesses as it relates to not only being paid, but just also kind of like the responsiveness there is of concern. And then city contract competition. You know, really trying to drive away from, you know, sole source or just limited bids for some bidders for some of these contracts. But, you know, how do we develop ways of continually increasing? I think it's one main principle inside finance that you guys say throughout the book, that, you know, with more competition drives a better price and better outcomes for the city. So, you know, I think there's a couple cases where either we had to go sole source or it was limited bidders for really important contracts that we want to do a better job on. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's start with the mainframe upgrade. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What's the time frame for that? How much is that procurement going to cost?
Absolutely. I'll pass it to the Revenue Chief in just a moment, but broadly speaking, we are still using extremely old systems that basically limit our ability to put detailed information on checks that we take in that can lead to confusion with just people we serve and interact with, and just a lot of manual effort that has to go into figuring out what goes where. We've been in preliminary stages of exploring our contract options for the last few months. We're looking pretty strongly at what jurisdictions around us are doing, and we're going to start on the first stages of this contract later in this calendar year, with a lot more work coming next year. I will pass it to the Chief of the Bureau of Revenue Collections, Carla Neely.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to give just a little more detail from what the director stated. We are in preliminary stages. We're looking at a contract that Baltimore County has to be able to piggyback on that particular contract to move it through the system a little quicker. We anticipate in early next year that we'll be able to do miscellaneous self-reported taxes first. We figured this would be our test case to see what goes well, what goes wrong, and then be ready for real estate. And so we anticipate that the real property system, which is the largest system that the Bureau actually manages, would be mid to late 2024, and then ending with the personal property tax system that's managed by a vendor. The vendor continues to take on more projects, new companies, but it doesn't really maintain, so we've had difficulty trying to maintain our personal property tax system, and we anticipate that that would be on board late 2024, early 2025.
Thank you for that detail. The real property tax system, are we talking about a commercial off-the-shelf solution, or are we talking about utilizing the cloud for that?
I missed your last comment.
A COT solution would be a software package that we would purchase. And then
Correct.
we would run on one of our servers versus
Correct.
cloud, meaning it would be hosted with another entity.
Forgive me, I believe it's going to be cloud-based, but that's more of a BSIC question than a
I'll
BRC.
save that.
It is cloud-based. Bill is here. It is cloud-based. I was pretty sure it was.
Cloud-based?
Yes,
Okay,
sir. Mhm.
Great. And I assume that as we're thinking about, can I set up a meeting off, who's the appropriate person from finance that I can meet with along with BSIT to talk about this?
We normally have a Thursday morning 9:30 meeting, and so would you like to just be a part of those meetings? Or you'd like something separate?
I'll get back to you on that. I don't know that I want to
But I'll reach out to you
commit to
after the
anything
meeting.
else. Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with the appropriate point of contact in
Absolutely.
finance.
And Chairman, Carlo would, I think, be the best point of contact for you.
Okay, great. And someone from BSIT, just to talk about
Absolutely.
requirements, development, and a couple other
They speak a
IT
different
principles.
language than I do. so.
Thank you. I know that the mainframe is programmed on COBOL, which is the computer programming language that we use to land a spacecraft on the moon, literally, in 1969. And the cost of programmers for that probably runs in the $300,000 to $350,000 a year. So appreciate that. Second question, in a letter that I sent to CAO Leach leading up to the budget hearings, I wanted to have a full discussion around the administration and the Department of Finance's timeline around what our MOE contribution was going to be this year. I know there was some changes to that as to what those projections were, but I kind of want to go through the entire timeline for the past couple years to how we got from when Kerwin and the blueprint first passed to how we got to where we're at today.
Absolutely. I'll pass it back to Laura.
Yeah, I can take that one, just to provide some context and history. So, the Kerwin legislation that passed at the state level, if you remember, it was passed and it was vetoed by the prior governor. The veto was overridden by the General Assembly. So our first year of new contributions was in fiscal '23, the fiscal year we're in now. The original Kerwin projections had a large increase. This is the projections coming from DLS, the state agency that analyzes all the bills. It had a large increase in the first year of the tune of around $60 million, and then it had about 4% growth from there, from 24 through fiscal 30. 4% growth is more than what we had seen over the past 2 decades, but it was manageable. So we went into this thinking we've got a big lift for fiscal '23, and then we're going to have more manageable chunks that we're going to have to deal with in the years prior. The first year played out exactly like the projection, almost nearly identical to what the projection said. We had a large increase last year. The way we funded that, if you remember from the budget, is we were able to utilize a new revenue source. It was the fire department entered into a program where they get reimbursement for Medicaid eligible transports. That used to be a general fund cost, so that was really like a savings to the general fund, and we used the majority of those savings to free up the money to pay for Kerwin. What hit this year was way beyond what was in the projections. Again, we were expecting to see a small increase in '24, '25, and all the way through '30. What happened this year, we learned, is that we, and Laura alluded to this in some of her overview presentations and some of the briefings she did with you, but there is one component of the formula that really worked against the city. There's something called the Education Effort Index in the formula, and not to get too lost in the weeds, but basically it measures how much effort a local jurisdiction makes divided by its wealth. So the city actually looks pretty good on education because we're making a lot of effort right now, and we're a less wealthy jurisdiction than many in the state, one of the poorest in the state. What happens, though, is a minor change in your index can drop you below a threshold in the law, and that's what happened to us. And one thing that's very important is that education effort index component. It's just a matter of how much the city pays versus the state pays, or any local jurisdiction when that index is measured. And this is very important because sometimes people think that when we're advocating for changes, we're trying to take money away from the schools. We're not. The way this index played out is that last year, because our index was just above
a threshold in the law, we got 100% credit on that amount, so the state paid for the entire amount, which is about 75 million. This year, we fell just below the threshold because of the way the calculations worked out, and if you get into the next threshold, our credit is only 35% from the state, and we pay the difference. That change, basically—
Bob, you said $75 million, and then you said 35%. Can you equate the 35% to dollars, please?
Yeah, so last year it was 75 million, and that calculation of what the total dollar amount for the index was, and we got 100% credit for that. This year, the actual amount in the calculation was over 90 million, and we only got a 35% credit for that. So it was about, I mean, I'm rounding here, about a $60 to $65 million hurt just on that one component of the formula, and that's what made up the big increase. What is really important to note is that I was not in the room, none of us were when the formulas were being worked out, but I've been told independently by multiple people that were there, is that in the DLS projections, we were expected to stay in that top tier and get that full 100% credit for the full, through fiscal 30. And that's why the projection showed us with a big increase in the first year, which we met, and then kind of more modest increases going forward. So we fell out of that top tier. And that's a whole nother conversation about why we fell out of that top tier, how we kind of, how we relate to other jurisdictions, because you're judged based on your effort versus the baseline for the state. We still think, and this is something we've talked internally, we still think that's a fixable item in the law. That's something that we have to go and say, hey, is there a solution for this? Because if not, we're going to be stuck at that higher level. And, our costs will continue to grow. The formula, we always have to add money each year for just the baseline formula and other components of the formula. But if we don't get that credit component fixed for, again, just that one component, the education effort index, we're going to be stuck at that higher level. So we've been talking internally, how do we approach that issue? Is there a way to do that? What's the most, palatable way to do that to get that fixed? Because we think that, we know that component, we were not expecting that, and it's impacting us quite a bit, obviously, with our budget this year.
Thank you. And when did we find out about two things? One, that the amount would be $90 million, and then when did we find out that we fell below that threshold, and therefore it was only 35% of the 90 million?
Yeah, it was late January, early February. The state, when the governor's budget comes out, the MSDE basically releases information about the formulas. And happy to share, I have a giant spreadsheet of last year's and this year that we spent a lot of time going through and comparing. When we first saw the number, honestly, we thought it was a mistake. Our first instinct was like, this can't be right. We reached out to some other jurisdictions. I know BBMR team had some good conversations with Prince George's, who were a little bit more deeply involved in the formula and kind of looking at it and helping us. And as we kind of dug into it, we're like, wait, this piece of it really impacted us. So it was really late January, early February. And remember, from a budget planning time frame, that's like pretty close to when we're getting ready to put, BBMR team is getting ready to put the budget documents together. It's only a month or so away before we're doing that. So that was a major change in our planning process. We went into the planning process thinking like, hey, we're feeling pretty good about where we are, and that really derailed things. From there, we reached out to our contacts at the state and tried to understand, is there a way to fix this? What can we do? And again, because it's buried in that formula, there was really a reluctance to raise the whole Kerwin issue, given how controversial it was at the state level. So we kind of felt our best approach was let's kind of deal with it this year, use fund balance to balance the budget, kind of regroup and figure out what's the best approach to try to get that, if not fixed, to just get some help for that issue, which is impacting us.
Okay, so the state budget came out on Friday, January 20th.
That sounds about right.
I'm just going based off the inauguration was the 18th, and that was a Wednesday, so let's call it the 20th. So did we find out both of those two data points? Again, one, the $90 million, which was a change from the previous year, and two, that we were beneath the threshold and it was that 35% figure of that at the same time?
No, we learned of the exact increase a couple weeks later. The I had a conversation with the Prince George's County Budget Director on Friday, February 3rd, and that's where he had shared with me the analysis that they had performed that showed sort of the impact of the formula on the city, that showed the $90 million increase.
And just another data point, so I actually received notification from my predecessor, the former city administrator, on February 1st. So he connected me with the city administrator in Prince George's County on February 1st. And about this issue, I then reached out to the Department of Finance, and they communicated also with their peers.
Got it. So just go back and bifurcate that question just so I have the exact specifics. So on the first we learned of this was February 3rd in the conversations with PG?
Well, City Administrator Leach had talked with her counterpart in Prince George's County to know that there was an impact bigger than what we were anticipating, and they connected the budget teams.
So between February 1st and February 3rd, we knew there was an impact.
Yes.
When did we find out about the $90 million figure versus the $65 million figure?
Well, I think that took us a little bit longer to figure out. I don't know the exact date, but because they give you, you see the total number, but then you have to dive into the formulas and look at the differences in all the components. So
we knew what the net impact was immediately.
Yes.
What we didn't know was how we arrived at the net impact, which would have been the $90 million figure plus the certain percentage.
yeah, and
Is that correct?
that's right. And we weren't sure at first, and so it did take a little bit of time. I probably weeks to kind of dig in and figure out what was impacting us. I'll tell you, my first instinct was that knowing how that education effort was calculated, that it's effort divided by wealth, my first instinct was like, our wealth must have gone up relative. That was my first thought. And actually, as we dug into it later, we learned that that was part of the issue, but the bigger piece is that we just fell below that tier that's buried in the state law that we figured out and we learned about. And again, we were never anticipated to fall below that level that was built into state law. I was actually told that that top tier, that 100% credit, was built for Baltimore City specifically. I was told that by multiple people that were part of the funding formula conversation. So we had that was the piece. Remember also there was a lot of noise, a lot of discussion about Medicaid enrollment, like how we were calculating poor students. So that was all in the news or coming out at that time. So we thought, maybe that impacted us. But as we dug further, all those things had a little bit of an impact, but really just that effort index falling below that threshold was a vast majority of the increase that we faced this year.
So just to close this out, we knew what the total net impact was going to be between February 1st through February 3rd, and then we kind of pieced it all together within the coming weeks.
Yeah.
But we knew February 1st through February 3rd.
Yep, and the other thing that I will offer, so, and team, correct me if I'm wrong here. So February 1st, I received a notification from my predecessor. By the 3rd, the two teams were meeting, the budget team and PG, as well as our budget team. I think we were then in conversation with the state to understand if there was an error with the formula. And then the team will know the exact date, but we actually did receive an updated figure from the state. Was that in May?
Yeah, so CA Leach is exactly right. When we got those initial numbers, what MSDE was telling us, along with our partners in Annapolis through the Moger team, and then also with the Department of Legislative Services, is that the state formula gets refined as we go through the spring. And they said, so you should expect updated numbers as they go through session. So we got one update on February 18th that showed the local share going from an $89.6 million increase going down to a $79.4 million increase. And then we received one final update on the local share amount in April. And that's the local share amount that's reflected in the recommended budget.
Got it. Very helpful. Can you all provide the committee before the end of the week an entire timeline of each of those milestones, even if it's just a bulleted list. I'd like a date and what happened and where the number, the percentage moved from and to, and who the notification was from or who the conversation was with. And Bob, you referenced a spreadsheet earlier.
Yes. Yes, there's a spreadsheet that jurisdictions get from MSD with all of the calculations, which we have.
And when did you receive that?
I'm not sure. I'd have to.
If you can include that on the bulleted list along with the spreadsheet. Nate, Nina, you guys got that?
And it's widely distributed information, so it's not sensitive. So I'm happy to walk anybody individually through kind of how we compared and did the analysis. So all the budget folks in the local jurisdictions eventually get that sheet from MSD.
Okay.
Can I just add one quick thing to that?
Council President's got to follow up.
Just real quick, the farms to Medicaid discussion. So that's been debunked at this point. It's something else maybe.
So it's
and if you could just for everybody's knowledge, just kind of 2 minutes go over that.
Yeah. So my understanding of this, and this didn't impact the city as directly, but it did have an impact on the schools and the state. Just want to be clear, but the way we understood it is they changed the methodology for how they basically count poor students. And my understanding of this is that really didn't pick up any additional kids in Baltimore City, but it picked up a lot of additional kids in other jurisdictions, including some wealthy jurisdictions, Howard County, Montgomery County.
And that changed our proportion of poor kids throughout the state.
Yeah, it did change our proportion. So I do think it had a small impact on what we owe. But I think the larger impact was the state, because the state has to provide part of the funding for kids that are poor kids in local jurisdictions per the formula. The state ended up having to spend more money in places that it wasn't expecting. Again, some of the wealthier jurisdictions are kind of middle-income jurisdictions.
So that made our effort go down proportional? Is that?
Well,
I'm trying to understand the math that dropped us below the index.
Yeah, that's separate. So that effort index is separate. There's a piece of the formula called compensatory education, basically, which is trying to compensate for, jurisdictions that have, larger, numbers of poor children. And that was, I think, where the impact came, that the state, and again, take the city out of this for a second, the state was seeing, oh, we're picking up more poor kids in other jurisdictions, and they had to provide more funding to those other jurisdictions. That didn't necessarily impact the city. That effort index is completely different from that calculation. Now, did that impact the schools directly? I think in a way it did, but I think they would be more, they'll be here I think tomorrow or this week, could probably speak more directly to that about how that impacted what they got from the state.
So what was the variable that dropped us under the index?
This gets real detailed. So the way the index is calculated, your effort is not calculated by the amount new contributions we're making. It's calculated based on what the state believes your effort should be. And going back to the Kerwin debate, the reason we were hit with a large increase in year one and additional contributions, and Prince George's is that we were basically deemed, the way they looked at the formulas, that we were a lower effort jurisdiction, that we weren't providing enough. Now, I don't like that, because the whole idea is poor jurisdictions should get more state aid, right? We should be spending less of our own money on education. The state should be contributing more. But in all the formulas and all the calculations and formula, they basically said, okay, Baltimore is a low effort jurisdiction and we'll need to catch up. What happens though is those larger or wealthier jurisdictions, they're getting credit for the fact that they were already at these higher levels of effort. So we always thought that when we made more effort, our index would get higher and we would never fall below this threshold. But what happened this year, that even though we're still a poor jurisdiction, other jurisdictions are now getting credit for the fact that they're already funding their schools at the effort that was expected in the Kerwin bill. And again, I think that's because I know that's because they have much larger tax bases, that they were able to fund, bigger increases for their schools. So the formula has not given us as much credit for effort as we should, I think, be getting, given the fact that we've actually had to spend more cash, a lot more cash over these last 2 years to the city schools. And again, I'd be happy to walk folks through. It's a very complicated formula, but I'd be happy to brief folks individually on it, because it is a very important, piece of information, and, is having a big impact on us.
Mr. Chair, just an add.
I got you. Councilwoman Ramos, just question.
Just
No,
for this.
no, just question only, no comments.
Yes. So could you also explain either now or in that additional information that you're going to provide us, what the calculation is for wealth? Because
Sure.
I thought that would also be a factor in terms of the fact that our assessments went up, but we're not actually getting revenue from those assessments.
It is, but our wealth growth from 23 to 24 in the formula ranked, I think, 23rd out of 24
Oh,
counties.
okay, so it didn't have much.
But that's, again, if our wealth, if we didn't keep pace with other jurisdictions, why should we be asked to pay almost 80 million more? That's another thing that's kind of mind-boggling about this, is that we did get wealthier, but relative to the other counties, we actually lost a little bit of ground compared to all the other counties. And again, I think, since we've been talking about this collectively internally because it's such an important issue, we're working on putting together just a short primer on this. And again, I'd be happy to brief folks in this building so that we all have a common understanding of this, because I think there is a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding out there.
When you have that primer completed, perhaps a Ways and Means Committee oversight hearing would be the appropriate forum to share
Sure.
that publicly.
Yeah, we would love to do that.
What's the expected time frame on that, Bob?
Yeah, like July, like right after the budget is done.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Okay, thank you. Starting down this end, Council VP.
Okay, first I just want to commend you, Director. When you arrived here, you also got involved and saw you on some neighborhood walks and so on, and was kind of shocked because I know your agency, most of the time, all of you really are working within your office and rarely get out to see, so would like to see that more, even, with all of you. So the residents can see that you are also hands-on. Your department is kind of like the most important department in our city because you're handling all of that taxpayers' money. And looking around, I see your office is very diverse. I see women have taken the lead. We are always the ones doing the groundwork, and appreciate all of you. I guess my first question is, do you have any current initiatives or programs that your offices are working on with that can enhance and help to educate our residents with financial literacy and education? Our residents are really starting to understand how important your office and department is, and how you make decisions and why you make the decisions you do as far as funding for various agencies. Are you connected with any fellowships with colleges? How are you helping our residents and through programs or initiatives?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Madam Vice President. That's a great question. And by the way, I am very happy to take you up on that offer of more site visits. This is my city now, and I want to learn as much of it as I can. But I think as our schedules get a little bit easier, I'll definitely be taking my team out with me to see different work of the city in the communities. With regard to financial education, there is quite a bit of work that BBMR has historically done on just helping the public understand the budget process. More broadly on financial education, that is a really interesting topic and something I would definitely be interested in looking at with you next year. But let me just check with my colleagues. Do we have any current programs on financial literacy beyond what BBMR does?
Good morning. We don't currently. I'd just like to note that another area of interest, looking more internally, is financial literacy for our employees. And so that is something that we'll be looking at is there programming not just related to budget, but also related to payroll, related to retirement, and ways that finance can support those efforts citywide?
Yep, I can, so to answer your question, the Mayor's Office of Employment Development actually has some financial education programming and resources, and they have been in conversation with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success and our Community Action Partnership Centers as well. And then also, the city was just awarded a grant to develop an economic mobility strategy from the Centers for Financial Empowerment.
Because you deal with the residents, it's important that there is some kind of connect, either through the youth or other ways. So appreciate if you could consider adding that. And then my second question, in the budget book on page 88.
Madam VP?
Yes.
Pause for 1 second. Who do we got upstairs? Welcome to City Council Chambers.
All right.
Thank you for joining us. You've joined us at the most exciting time of the year, Budget Week. Madam Vice President, the floor is yours.
See, we do have students that are interested in the budget process. So the second question was on page 88, and I see that you hired 5 collection positions, and the money came from the 83 camera citations. And just, which is, fine, but I know that the state had was working on or had put in a bill to also have those funds used for community association street projects along that 83 corridor. So I don't know if you are aware of that, or if there's an update on that, but specifically that's Delegate Rosenberg.
We'll find out. Our understanding of the bill was that the revenues from the I-83 traffic cameras could only be used either for the administration of the program, which these are, or improvements just on I-83. We would prefer that there was broader authority. We thought even from the start that was just a little more limited. We'd rather be able to spend it in other areas, but that was my understanding. We can check with our MOGR team on that language or that bill you're talking about, if that passed or if that was, making headway in this session or next session.
Yeah, please do, because a lot of the conversation was specifically around the busiest intersection in the city, and that's Northern Parkway and Falls Road, and I think there was conversation. That's how this all started, the idea, and maybe all along that whole corridor. So I just don't want that money to disappear for this one thing when there were other ideas or a bill out there that included this other piece.
Okay, we can find out.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Director, I did have a question related to service number 707, the risk management for employee injuries. We've had a significant amount of workplace injuries in many of our agencies, and I noticed that the budget eliminates funding for 2 safety officer positions. Could you share the rationale on why those positions were eliminated from the budget?
So they're actually being repurposed, and Sean Kay can speak to that. We're trying to reorganize that particular service.
Thank you for that.
Good morning. So we are actually repurposing that to create a manager-level position. As we know, occupational safety is important to the city, and right now, what we've done in risk management historically is try to manage everything. So what we're doing is creating a manager position for oversight, so then that manager can help, of course, train out other employees and then work with our agency partners as we also empower them to understand risk, understand incidents, and then they'll report up to us. So it's not actually going away, we're repurposing it, yes.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. And then, do you all have connections? So I'm glad that we are repurposing it, because from my assumption that it's going to be a higher paid position, it's going to be a higher professional level of experience. But I'm concerned that it's only one person for multiple agencies. Are you all doing a liaison approach? Like, what's the process there for that?
So that's exactly what we're looking at, is a liaison approach. So we've been working with the OLC's office to actually identify individuals within agencies that can work as our agency liaisons, and then they will report the incidents to our office. And then, as you know, the DCAO is always also working on the incident and the accident review committees with us as well. But those liaisons can report up to us. You talked about the employee injuries increasing. We've also seen a steep decline, not just from COVID, but I also think it's because they don't have that central person within the agency to report out what true incidents are. And we're not trying to cost the city any additional money by reporting this out, but we want to make sure that everybody has a safe work environment. So we will be taking the approach that you mentioned.
And you bring up a good point. You know, COVID-19 has really seen a decline in some of the classifications. I'm more concerned about the more labor-intensive positions that we do have in the city, and also not just bodily, but also like workplace conditions, injuries that can exist from the environment. You know, definitely want to look at that as well.
And so what we're also doing with that is partnering with the Department of General Services, because there's a fine line between what risk management and occupational safety does and then what they do. So once we identify it, sometimes we have to defer to them. So we're working internally so that sometimes they can go out and actually identify it and then actually respond to it faster than us going out to identify, then contacting our partner. So we're just trying to smooth out that pipeline a little bit, and so that employees know what to expect, managers know, and then everyone is safe at work as well.
And do we have a timeline on the document? Do we have a timeline on the standard operating procedures for that process?
So, I knew you would ask that. We are...
And you don't have to answer now. I'm just really looking for, one of the things that I've, really been pushing, and I'm sorry to cut you off. One of the things, because if you don't have an answer, but I don't like to put people on the spot. But one of the things that I'm really looking for is for our agencies to be foreshadowing and really thinking deeper about operating procedures. Given that we have, some movement within our agencies, I want to make sure that we have documented procedures, people know where to find them, who is the DRI, what is the correct process, because that can be communicated to our entire workforce as well. And then, should there be any liability associated with it, we can go back to those standard operating procedures and really clearly document our processes and also anything else associated with it.
So it's all encompassing, right? Because what you said, you touched on everything so eloquently, because I'm super wordy. So thank you for that. But the other part of that is that we're looking at an overall safety manual, right? Just for the overall procedures, understanding that each individual entity may differ a little bit based on the nature of their work, and then they have to provide us with their safety materials so that we can go over it, we can review it to make sure it all aligns, creating, again, that streamline, that workflow process. And then we're also working with learning and development. So by working with learning and development, what we can do is then we can assign classes to employees in Workday.
Wonderful.
So if we know that Sean Kay has had multiple slip, trip, and falls, right? We're going to say, hey, you need to take these classes. Once you've taken a certain amount of classes, is there another issue that's there? So that's the way, there's multiple ways to identify the challenges just to see, but we are creating that.
That's good. My next question was this going to be implemented in the Workday platform? So I'm glad to see that it's all integrated there. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got two questions. This is more from a personal experience for me in my office. We get a number of constituents who have a lot of trouble getting someone on the phone from finance. They'll call, they'll leave voicemails and otherwise, and just have trouble getting follow-up and feedback. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on there, and if there's any way that we're trying to address that capacity issue in this budget?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of different factors, but there's one overarching factor, and that's staffing. Staffing has genuinely been difficult. We know that we're not at the place that we'd like to be. We're finally starting to see some green shoots. We're starting to see some improvement. And so depending on the area, there's sometimes a little bit of improvement and sometimes there's a lot. In revenue collection, for example, we have been turning around basically lien processing and transactions to do with property registration from a backlog of weeks and months at one point down to just the proper correct several days that it takes, which means that we are now able to take requests in real time as they come in. Other places, it's been more challenging. I mentioned payroll before. That was probably our biggest challenge earlier in the year, where we simply had so much to fix and so few people to do it that we just had to triage and do what we could. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it really does come down to the people, and those response times in payroll have drastically improved just in recent weeks. Our next big area of focus, which you've all heard me talk about quite a bit and you'll be hearing a lot more, is procurement. And I think on procurement, you know, it's a big citywide ecosystem that involves lots of players at the agencies and sometimes the providers themselves. But staffing will help. And I think on procurement, being smarter about who's assigned to what will also help. And that's what we're going to look at with the procurement transformation.
And so we're looking at additional staffing in this budget to meet those needs.
So it's really getting back up to the level that we're already budgeted to. So I think the budget has all the resources that we need, and the budget already assumes that, you know, realistically, we're not going to go overnight from a 30% vacancy rate to nothing, and so we assume some turnover savings. But my goal is to get us to at least a 15% vacancy rate, at least. My target is 10%. And that's all just against the current budget. I think the difference in service that people will see on the ground will be night and day when we're able to reach those goals.
And what is our vacancy rate right now?
It's right around 30% right now for the Department of Finance. And I'll just say for a moment that's bad. I've been in other jurisdictions, obviously. Pandemic hit everybody hard. This is a tough point to be coming out of in the pandemic, where competing in the Department of Finance against the private sector, because we hire a lot of accountants, we are competing against the surrounding counties and the state and the federal government. But in the last few months, we've stopped dropping and we're starting to grow, and we're finally outrunning the treadmill and picking people up faster than people retire. So you'll be seeing a lot of improvement in fiscal '24.
I appreciate that. I think to my initial question, that external facing piece is really important when we have folks calling into the city. Just whatever we can do to shore that up, I think is really important. Absolutely. So that, you know, when people call the city, they get a response or some sort of follow through. And I totally appreciate the staffing issues. I think we're seeing that really in a number of agencies. My other question is kind of on the coattails of that one. My office has seen a number of instances in which we've had trouble getting checks out the door. I've had constituents who've waited 9 months to get reimbursement for like Ring cameras, things like that. I'm curious how we're addressing things like that. And I know this goes to probably issues that we've seen in other places, but how are we looking to tackle
Absolutely.
issues like that?
And so the first step is kind of diagnosing the problem. And I said before, it's an ecosystem, and it really is. The last piece of it, which is getting the checks out the door, used to be with the Department of Finance, now it's with the comptroller. That's the piece that, frankly, is working the best right now. It's all the pieces leading up to it, basically the verifications that you need to do that the work was done, the service was performed, the boxes are checked. It relies on people, and so when there are staffing challenges, that is where it sometimes falls into gaps, when it just moves to somebody who's overstretched. But this is also something that we think we can potentially streamline more. We've been looking quite a bit at process mapping, the approval process, and I think that in just the next few weeks with the incoming new procurement chief and with the launch of the procurement transformation, we're going to go public with basically our roadmap, which is going to start immediate changes on how we move approvals. So the long and the short of it is that it's getting a little bit better, and it's going to get a lot better in the coming year.
Yeah, if you could give a little bit more detail on what the process is for a check release. In the particular instance that I'm thinking of, this instance, they had multiple check releases, and so it kind of got caught in limbo for a while.
Would you mind being a little bit more detailed about the specific issue?
And maybe we can have this be a committee request so that we understand this going forward. What is the process for a check release? What does it take in order to release that check so that said person can be paid?
Hang on, what type of check? Just because we have so many, there are so many checks to talk about.
Exactly.
Well, in this particular instance, I'm thinking about a constituent who was getting a rebate on a Ring camera.
Ring camera, okay.
Sorry, getting a rebate on what?
So in 2019, I passed a law actually that created actually it's 2020, a rebate for private security cameras. So I think, hang on, CAO, maybe Nina has background on this. Aren't those processed by, they used to be a process by Elise. Where'd Elise go? She's at OEM now. Elise was the master of the Ring rebates. Microphone.
Sorry. So Elise used to be in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety.
That's who we need, right?
Yes, and she is now at 311.
So is that still under, would that function be under Deputy Mayor Barksdale?
Let me circle back. So
Okay.
I'll check with Elise to see where it is.
So why don't we make it a more general request
update.
around the private security rebate program, which is the official name of the program, reimbursements. And we'll leave it to the administration to figure out who's responsible. Okay, back to you, Councilman.
Thank you. And is Ms. Turner in the Department of Finance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's in revenue collections.
Okay, got it. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Stokes.
Mr. CEO, my question is Workday. We know when it was implemented, I don't know if you're retraining people that handle that, but we talk about our small business here in the city. They're still not getting paid on time. Some of our businesses probably getting ready to go out of business because of the process of Workday. I understand Workday, everything went into Workday. So everybody get paid through Workday. I have a gentleman for a whole year had not got his COVID pay, and I'm still getting emails from him because it's like this back and forth email about his money. So did you investigate to find out what went wrong with Workday now that you have to change it and make it a lot better? Because it's still happening. There's still some problems with Workday.
Director, hang tight for 1 second. Elise Gillespie, who is a model city employee because she's watching budget hearings right now, text messaged me to say that the rebate program is still processed by Monsi in DOF. So Nina, if you could track down, thank you very much. Director, back to you.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. It's about Workday, but it's ultimately about paying people, and we have to pay people on time. I absolutely recognize that there have been challenges in that. In looking at what went wrong, why aren't we doing it better? Again, it really is just having the trained, knowledgeable people in the right places to do what they need to do. And I'll say that, you know, I had the benefit of coming in from outside, so I'm not wedded to Workday. I'm wedded to paying people promptly. And I came in fully ready to see anything, including if we needed to just change back to the old way or, you know, some extreme solution. And the short answer is no, there's nothing actually wrong with the system. It's just that when you go through a system change, you've got to train a lot of folks. And if I look back at the last few years and what I have done differently, I would have told Henry to cancel the pandemic, you know. That was bad timing. I think that we have to figure out what to do from here going forward, and it is getting the right training in place, the right people in place. That's why we're still seeing issues, but those issues are decreasing, and they'll keep decreasing until they get to nothing. And we do, like I said, have to be a little bit smarter about how we configure our processes, what approval goes from who to who. The system is just a tool at the end of the day. It'll let us do whatever we want to do. We have to be the ones to say, all right, these approvals are coming one after the other. We can actually do these in parallel and save a little bit of time.
But my other follow-up question is, when a lot of them city employees receive their pay, they either got overpaid, they didn't get all their money.
Yes, sir.
They had money coming out of their check. So if your check is short, you got overdrafts for city employees, the ones that out there working hard, that probably the salary is the least paid kind of city employees. So how are we reimbursing that piece? Because if you get an overdraft, is the city paying for that? When my check, I had a guy out at War Memorial, he showed me a check, it was $17. So he got money cut out of his check and other things. How are we processing that in terms of replacing, or if an employee have an overdraft? I hope the city not tell them, you know, it's your fault, we can't do that. So is there a process in place also for that?
Absolutely. I'll start a little bit at a high level, then I'll throw it to my team. First off, I'll just say, you know, I spoke a little bit earlier about that place we were in on payroll a year ago. With one person, when you're supposed to have 10, something was going to go wrong. No system in the world would have prevented us from that. So what we're doing to make sure that it never happens again is getting the right people in place and really investing in retaining them, building that permanent forever team. Now, as far as people who were overpaid on their various retro adjustments, our general policy has been to try to reverse cleanly anything that was incorrect. We've worked very closely with our partner banks to make sure that there are no draft charges that we know of. When folks are overpaid, we do have to get the money back. But if there are penalties, we will certainly work directly with those folks. I don't actually believe there are penalties I'm currently aware of, but Julie, I will pass the mic to you for a moment to speak a little bit about the details.
Good morning. So we have a couple staff now that we have allocated to work on overpayments. We have one person internally of the 11 people that we have staffed within payroll, and we have 1 to 2 different people with our consulting group, RS Consulting, who work with overpayments. That's their job on a daily basis. When someone enters a ticket for an overpayment, it goes into our ticketing system. So if they send an email, it goes into a ticketing system. That ticketing system assigns it to that person, and that person is assigned to work it. There is a backlog. We're working hard to reduce it. One of the things that we're doing with BSIT is we're looking for a way to automate the assignment of tickets so that rather than every ticket coming in, a person has to look at it and assign it. We're looking for a way for there to be a drop-down menu so if it's an overpayment, it automatically gets routed to that person. It is difficult when you have overpayment issues, so I would say one of the things we're looking to do is prevent the overpayment from occurring because it's so time-consuming to correct it. It gets into complicated areas, tax issues and things like that. So we're trying to look to hire an accounting system analyst who will go in and be responsible for doing an audit before the payroll is actually run and looking for some key areas.
So what's the timeline on hiring the person? But my other question would be, the person that was overpaid, what's the process of a city employee paying back whatever the amount of money they were paid? Because if you're talking about an employee that don't make a whole lot of money, you can't expect them to give you a whole lot of money back even though they were overpaid. So is there a process in terms of them paying back the money that they did not ask for, but the mistake was made?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a process on how they pay back? Is it a sliding scale? I mean,
absolutely, and if I may jump in for a second, because Acting Chief Floyd has been incredible in jumping up to the plate and just taking on a whole range of duties, but I do want to support her on the payroll issue. So the city has a standard overpayment policy in the administrative manual, and we can provide a copy of that. I don't want to quote it off the top of my head because what I like to do every time a situation like this occurs is pull that out and follow that step by step. So the Department of Finance does follow that. I'll say with one exception. So where we do have employees that have experienced a large overpayment, the directive from our current director and our former director has always been we want to resolve these with fiscal integrity and following policy, but also keeping in mind that these are human beings that have families, that are working hard for the city, who in many cases experienced an error that isn't their fault. And so in line with that, what you've seen us do is extend the overpayment. So the overpayment policy contemplates a payment within, I believe, don't quote me on this, I'll get you the policy, within about 12 months. We will extend it beyond that if those payments are not in line with what the employee can cover. I will also note that we also have looked at using accrued leave. So the policy contemplates that the Director of Finance can allow the use of accrued leave for repayment in certain circumstances, and the Director has been very supportive of doing that, which is another way to alleviate the burden from the employee. And finally, just to reiterate, I think Acting Chief Floyd made an excellent point. The goal is to not have the overpayments occur to begin with. And so we are initiating the development of more standard operating procedures around payroll. We have a list of ones that we hope to accomplish over the summer. We think that that will really help as we staff up to ensure that we're both staffing up, training, and providing the support that our employees need.
so Mr. Chair, real quick, can we get a request for, you say y'all going to hire another accountant to address what you were just talking about? You say you were going to hire another accountant.
Yes, accounting system analyst.
Can we get that request? And I have one more question. It's for risk management. Okay, she said they were going to be hiring an accountant to address some of the, was it overpayments, I believe?
Well, we want to, in order to prevent the overpayments from occurring, we want a person, accounting system analyst, to review the payroll on a weekly basis and have some key things that they want to look for before the payments go out so that the overpayments don't occur, like the big errors are reviewed.
So, Councilman, let me know if this covers your request. Can you provide a brief written narrative explaining that accountant position and what the scope of that position will be to address the overpayment issue? Does that work?
Yeah, and what's the timeline and actually hiring
What's a reasonable time frame for that?
We have an open position now, as soon as we can hire them.
No, what's the time frame for providing that written narrative?
A week.
A week, okay.
And one more question, Mr. Chair. This is for risk management. I was on my way to Mayor Scott's State of the City going up to Washington Street. Somebody T-boned me on Lafayette going east, and actually on the driver's side, passenger side, they knocked the whole door off the city car. When I got to Mercy Hospital, they told me, "Where's your accident report?" when I just came from the accident. And I walked out. They wouldn't wait on me. But then they called me back in. I guess if I wasn't a city council person, I would have just went on home. And that was kind of real disturbing for me, that if I just came from an accident and you asked me for an accident report, what, I got to have an application in the car? So what happens? How do we change that? Because if that was a regular city employee, they probably would have kept going. Only because I guess they knew I was a councilman. I was outside ready to leave. They came back and I said, "Oh no, come on back in here. We're gonna wait on you." But that process was real disturbing for me. If somebody just coming straight from an accident and go to Mercy and then they ask you for the report from your employer, like, I must fill this out while I'm riding to Mercy Hospital. So it was kind of, that process was real disturbing for me.
So again, I am so sorry about your accident. I recall you calling me to voice these concerns, and then I saw you when we talked about this. And I know it's been a while, so, you know, the sentiment hasn't changed. I really am sorry for the process and what you went through, but we also have to understand that there is a written process in place. So while Mercy could have given you a waiver to say, "Come in, you just left the scene of the accident," we always have to call in and at least let our managers know, let an assigned HR practitioner know this, and then they could take care of the paperwork for you so that when you arrived at Mercy, they would have welcomed you because your paperwork was already there. The other part of the process as well is that, and so you're right, Councilwoman, you don't have an actual manager, but you do have an assigned individual within the city council and the mayor's office who takes care of this information. So sometimes it's just that knowledge sharing to let members of the city council, city government know what to do in the event of this. And we've had the mayor go to Mercy, right? And he follows the process to a T, but then we know how he is. He likes to follow the processes to the T. But in your instance, as I stated to you last year, and then when I saw you again at AFRAM, is that if you had contacted someone, your assigned person, they would have taken care of that. So when you arrived at Mercy, they would have known that you were forthcoming. The other part of it though, and I just want to add this little piece right here, it's a safety precaution, right? Because you should go with a member of your staff, a member of HR, management, because if you are severely injured and then you have to go across the street, someone needs to accompany you. And there are many instances where I've shown up when there are not managers that are assigned. So there are some tweaks that can be placed there, but a lot of this is a safety precaution for the injured individual and just making sure that Mercy has someone else there in case that person, once you get there, can't speak for themselves, or when that person gets there, they realize the injury is more severe and they have to defer to someone as a POC to contact that individual's family member. So there's some tweaks that can be made there. And again, I'm going to offer it to you. You can join our team and our committee as we look at this to revamp it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I know we did have a conversation, but my only conversation was I did reach out to the president's office, and they knew what had happened because I couldn't make the state of the city. So I went through the process. I only worry about what about just an average employee that's coming through there to have an accident. I can't call my staff and tell them, you know, I had an accident. I almost ran into a house. So I was in pain. So my job, my responsibility is go to Mercy Hospital when you have an accident. I reached out to Jose in President Mosby's office, so he knew. But when I got there, it was a little different. The only concern was not just because I was an elected official, but the average city employee. I hope they don't have to go there. And you did acknowledge that we need to work on it. So I just wanted to share that with you, that the average city employee should not have to fill out an accident. I'm not going to have an accident form in my car to wait to have an accident. When I get there, I say, yeah, here's my report. That's all I was concerned about. So thank you for the information.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to just give a huge shout out to Ms. Turner, Director Neely. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten, constituent needs and they're met immediately. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. We shouldn't have to go to them. I hope, you've already articulated that you're going to be working through the process. So I do appreciate that. Also, a shout out to Ed Scrivener. He's been really phenomenal for us trying to solve tax sale issues with our constituents. So please pass the word that we very much appreciate him. Whatever help he needs to whatever. Anyway, he's been great, so I appreciate that. And of course, also appreciate your leadership, Director, that, you've really committed to making sure that we can go through this tax sale reform and make sure that, paying property taxes shouldn't be such a burden. And so I look forward to continuing the conversation with you as we, get ready for the General Assembly as we go through the reform process. So I appreciate that as well. Related to that, I had heard earlier in the conversation that we're doing, reforms to the, property tax payment system. We had passed legislation to allow for installment plans that should be implemented by July of this year, is what the bill says. And then the mayor's office, with my office, we introduced legislation to have payment plans in arrears for those who've been pulled out of the tax sale. So is that because you're going through the new system? Are those timelines going to be changed at all? Or are we still expecting a July 1 announcement?
Would you
Director
like me to
Neely.
respond?
I'll start with a high-level response, and then, Carla, I'll move it to you. I think that we will be working closely with your office to coordinate that announcement. I think that there's definitely a lot of technical work that will need to be done in kind of creating the process for a repayment plan, and the new system was really conceived outside of that. It's not gonna impact any timelines or slow anything down, but I think we'll want to just make sure we're really closely coordinated on the release. Carla, do you want to?
Councilwoman, we will make your timeline for the Future Tax Savings Program, which is the payment in advance. And then I know there's now conversation about how to implement payments in arrears, because that'll be a little different.
Oh, yeah.
But that'll be through our new payment provider, Paymentus. So that wouldn't affect the actual project that we have to replace the whole real estate system.
Oh, okay. So there's two separate things going on.
Yes,
They're all going to talk to each other eventually. But,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure we were still on that timeline.
And thank you very much for the acknowledgement of the staff, but one of the biggest components of the Bureau of Revenue Collections is Deputy Chief Reed, who's in the back. So that's the one.
Well, acknowledge, really to the team, it's been super, super helpful. So I do appreciate that. My second question is more of a request of a lot of information about TIFs. So I'm going to go through the information and then I'll send you this in writing. I'm interested in getting a lot more information about the impact of our tax increment financing. The first would be a detailed accounting of all of the TIF projects and debt service associated with each project. My understanding is that we're going to be now up to the Port Covington debt service this year. So if we could get a detailed accounting of city spending on debt service by TIF project from the beginning of when we've been doing TIFs, unless they've already been retired.
Councilwoman, how many items do you have on your list?
4, 5?
Okay. If you could, as quickly as possible, run through them and then send them to me or forward me the email. We'll get over as official requests, just for the sake of time, because we only got a couple minutes.
I appreciate that. Okay. The impact on city revenues in general of TIFs in terms of revenues not being able to come in a certain amount of time. The economic impact, which would include job creation, housing creation, and whether or not members of the people are moving into the city. And then an examination of any changes you'd like to see in the TIF policy, whether that's the removal of taxing districts, or whether it's bond floating, whether it's what other kinds of things you want to see in there. And then the last thing is an examination of how to use TIFs to eliminate vacant and abandoned properties. And I will send this over to you as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to, I've been trying to get this data for a long time, so I'm trying to get that through this process.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I will send this over to you as well, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple questions. Well, I'll start, Director, you mentioned COVID, so we'll start there. While the previous COVID emergency has been, I'm using air quotes here, concluded, I'm curious as to what we have learned in the planning for a potential new pandemic crisis or that has that same level of economic impact. Has there been any significant disaster preparedness planning within the Finance Department, strategizing on how we can better put the city in better position moving forward, which are just things that, are best practices across the country and I would say the globe to sort of think through like what could happen if something like this happened again and how are we using the lessons we learned to improve processes?
Absolutely. I think it's probably been on everybody's mind for the last 3 years or so in every jurisdiction. I would say for Baltimore, some things that we did well was probably just being on a good fiscal footing. We were able to weather through because we had good reserves and we're generally in a pretty structurally well-balanced position. That is something that we just kind of saw the importance of as we went through all this and something that we will maintain. Something that we were not prepared for is the effect that it was going to have on both our short-term operations, and I think through COVID, the big lesson learned was to get away from paper, get away from these very time-intensive, labor-intensive processes, because not only are they wasteful, but they really limit your ability to respond to crises in real time. I think we got a lot better at that sort of thing during COVID, and we need to keep building on that. Something that coming out of COVID now is a whole brand new world is the staffing issue. The workforce is fundamentally changing, and I think that for one thing, one of those lessons learned is just how do we adjust to that, but another is how do we create recruiting pipelines that let us stay current on what current employees want, what their skills are, what their needs are. And really, I think that's one of the big lessons for me is staying attached to the universities around here, staying attached to the different centers that drive our workforce. As far as looking at just pure disaster preparedness, I'm going to pass it back to Shanke to just talk about the risk management aspect of it.
Yes, so we are looking to work together with our current insurance broker as well as engaging a consultant so that we can prepare for these. Hi, I'm down. I'm all the way on the end. So that we can actually prepare for these and we can forecast them a little bit and just prepare differently. You know, COVID was a black swan. Nobody expected it to happen. Nobody expected the world to shut down. And so now that we've seen it and we're looking at lessons learned, we're now working with we will be working with our insurance broker and a consultant to say, how can we forecast this? What can we do differently? What will the impact be? And how can we just have business as usual without a major interruption to anything?
And I'll add one last thing to it, which is we were having a conversation about the procurement transformation, and we were looking at process change. And a question got asked, which is, what if another COVID comes along? And we didn't see COVID coming, but we're always ready for the last disaster, right? Before COVID, everybody was thinking hurricanes. Before hurricanes, everybody was thinking terrorist attack. We're not going to know what the next disaster looks like. What we have to do is make ourselves robust. And that means well-staffed, using modern technology, modern equipment, and having the policies and the insurance in place to respond quickly.
Got it. Thank you. My second question, and this is around like the payroll and accounts payable world, the next two are. How many payments are currently outstanding, and what is the plan to make sure that once the department transitions, I believe this is going under the comptroller's office, that there's no additional missed or delays or minimizing missed or delayed payments?
Well, like I said, the ticketing system is extremely important and automating it. I think we had a review with our consultants a couple weeks ago, and I believe the number was over 1,000 outstanding tickets that we had. And we were looking to reduce those down to a couple hundred over the summer. So again, one of the difficulties that we had this past year was a lot of the union agreements required retros back months and months back, maybe even years. That caused a lot of issues where agreements for pay that occurred a year ago required retro payments. So I think, quality control, we are now undergoing training for the staff that we do have. They are attending Workday, a 2.5-day Workday payroll integration, payroll introduction training for all of them. And I think we're just going to do that mandatory when every new staff person comes on. They'll go to this Workday training, which is heavy. It's a heavy lift for training. That's a lot of training.
Got it. Okay. And my last question, Mr. Chair, and this is just more of a where you guys are thinking moving forward. So to my colleagues, concern or question raised about paychecks and people getting paid on time. As you know, many people have a valid need to be paid on a more regular basis, and I've worked in places that folks were getting paid weekly or daily, depending on obviously the context, rather than sort of bi-weekly payments. Has the city done any research on whether or not we will be able to offer this type of or a different type of payment structure for some positions in the city? Just a way to boost employment, to attract younger professionals who are looking at sort of different ways of how we work, whether those are like shorter work days or 4-day work weeks or weekly payments. Like the ecosystem is changing, and the expectations of particularly the younger workforce are that they want a little bit more flexibility in that. Have you explored looking at how we do payments, generally speaking? And if so, if you've done any analysis, could you provide that to the committee as a request?
Sure. I'll start the answer, and then I'll pass it back to Julie. So we already have a few different models for payment. Biweekly is kind of the predominant one, but there's a few outliers. From the perspective of just getting over the troubles that we've had, I wouldn't really say that the specific way that we pay was really the issue. It was more just that confluence of staff loss and complicated adjustments coming through. But from the perspective of an incentive for new staff, that is certainly something we're open to. I think that conversations around that and research around that is still very early, but you're right, we are in a new world with a different workforce. I think there's a lot of things to solve for here, but we would certainly be open to it. I'm going to pass it to Julie.
So there's very few people right now who get paper checks. We still have several hundred holdouts right now. I would love to see them convert over to electronic payment. The other thing I wanted to mention is the city has a very complex pay group schedule. We have like maybe 15 to 20 different pay groups, like cycles. Like the city does not pay everybody on a regular, let's say, Sunday to Saturday. All the different unions, all the different groups may have different pay groups. And that makes it very complex for our payroll people. So one of the things we've talked to our consultants about and are going to have to get Accenture, our Workday consultants, involved in is how we can consolidate and change our pay groups so that it's not such a complex process to process payroll. I suspect many other jurisdictions don't have the many varied payment schedules that we have throughout the city. It's way too complicated.
So as a request, I guess, what information on the cost analysis or an analysis of like what it would take to move to a weekly pay schedule would be helpful for us?
We will certainly do research on it. What do you think as far as?
So, Councilman, I appreciate the ask, and I think it's an important point, right? We should be looking to modernize. There are many companies that are moving to the weekly, some are moving to daily.
Right.
As Acting Chief Lloyd noted, there are constraints. There are constraints around union type. There are constraints around how things are configured. So I think one of the things that we could commit to is looking at the idea. I don't know that internally we have the capacity right now to do a full assessment. And I think we would also want to draw in our partners, the Office of the Labor Commissioner, who would have a better sense for, what is allowed under certain union contracts. Is this a point that would need to be negotiated in contracts? I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, as well as the Department of Human Resources, because those are the partners that we really work with on a weekly basis in terms of checking in on what our individual projects are and how they intersect. So we can certainly commit to raising that issue with them, doing some initial analysis in terms of, is this happening in other municipalities and in local governments? And then get back with that, if that would be
That would be helpful,
acceptable.
a picture of what best practices are, what other jurisdictions are doing. Because we just note that it's just, from my lens, it's about retaining and attracting employees. We're losing folks who want to just be contractors because they get paid more frequently, or, we get folks who want to go into the private sector because there's more flexibility in the ways that they paid. Like I said, I worked for labor before I was an elected official. I got paid weekly. That was incredibly nice as a young professional. Who had very timely bills to be paid. And I wasn't making a lot of money, but at least a weekly payment was helpful, so I wouldn't be hungry for another week until the next check came. And so I know if that was my experience as a young professional, a lot of folks are going through those exact same things, and particularly folks who work in jobs that are particularly strenuous and underpaid. Having a weekly payment could make a difference and would make us, I think, more competitive from what we're seeing in multiple agencies. Obviously, it's not your shop in particular, but like a lot of the larger agencies are having a hard time attracting and retaining employees. And so I think the more innovative and forward-thinking we can be, we'll be more competitive in the marketplace. So that would be helpful. That analysis would be helpful as a committee request.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Bob, Laura, I'm remiss for not having mentioned Mara. Thank you for the excellent work from BBMR. Is Ed Scrivener here? No, sir. What's Ed doing today? Ed is phenomenal. I just want to take a moment to give him a shout out. Joanna, Pedro, thank you for everything you guys do. Miss Neely, Miss Reed, you guys are my heart. Can't tell you how much I appreciate you. You are amazing public servants. Joanna, you have been nothing short of fantastic. Director, you are very, very blessed to have an incredible team in the Department of Finance and in BBMR. I think you are very well positioned for success moving forward because of the team around you. So thank you all. We're now in recess. We'll be back at 12:30 p.m. sharp for Law Department.